sponsored Herod in Palestine were upset that Herod killed his own children. They didn't think that was the proper behavior of a puppet king that they had put in power in this part of the world. And he owed his power to them. That's why this whole thing about, the Jews killing Christ and all this sort of thing is so off base in terms of the historical situation in Palestine. You have an occupied country in which the rulership are either Roman governors or puppet kings put in power by the Roman authorities, and the previous nationalist dynasty and beloved group had already been exterminated, and you have, as I've told you, 100, 200 years of revolutionary strife. Literally, from 167 to 136 AD. So basically almost 300 years of strife. And after 63 BC, what happens in 63 BC that's crucial to all of what we're talking about?
Beginning of
Huh?
nothing.
You probably know. What happened in 63 BC? We know what happened in 167 or so, the Maccabean kingship. So I probably covered this, I don't know, sometimes I get confused, but it doesn't hurt to keep covering it till you get it in. Who's he? How many have been watching that HBO miniseries, Rome? Well, it's worth watching. I told you that, I think, but it's worth watching. It's very good. In terms of, it's the struggle of Pompey and Caesar for control of Rome. And he was the one who was struggling with Caesar forever. It's done from a popular viewpoint from down in some of their lower sort of people who are Roman legionnaires and so on, and problems they're having in Rome. But it follows the historical strife pretty good. And it ends with the assassination of Caesar. And they're going to have another series starting next spring, which will pick up from there and probably proceed through the fight between Augustus and Mark Antony and Cleopatra and so on, down to the rise of Augustus.
Was he involved with the war between Hyrcanus and Aristobulus?
Yes, he was. Now you've been reading your Josephus in another class, obviously. That class, the Dead Sea Scrolls class. So these two classes parallel each other to a certain extent in that regard, and Ron has been reading that stuff in Josephus, yeah. So there are these two brothers who fight, she knows. It's sort of the third generation of Maccabean rulership. This is the older brother. They've already Grekified their names by this time, but they have Hebrew names too. This, I think, usually John is most people don't think of John as a Hebrew name, but it is. It's Yochanan. Means God comforts. And usually the Hebrew name of Aristobulus is Judas. So they have their Hebrew names too. But she's getting ahead of us. But if you look at Josephus' Jewish War, you'll find that the first generation is Judas. Then he's succeeded by brothers, Jonathan and Simon. Then Simon's children are the ones that survive. So the next generation, which is about 130 to 100, is John Hyrcanus, Simon's powerful son. Then John Hyrcanus has some children, and the one that survives there is someone called Alexander Unias. So it goes Simon. It really goes, I'll do it quickly. I know this, since I don't want you to be confused.
These are all Herodians, though.
No, these are Maccabees.
No.
These are Maccabeans. Judas, Simon, John, Hyrcanus. These are succeeding generations. Alexander, Unias. Unias would be Jonathan. And then what she's talking about, Hyrcanus II and his brother Aristobulus. Now this is 167 and this is 63. So that's the 100-year succession in between that time. It's all in Josephus. Now you're not responsible for listening to this class, but in your own mind it's useful to know what happened before Jesus. I mean, how do we fit him in? Anyway, here what she's talking about is these two brothers fall out. He's the oldest, he's the youngest, but he's the popular one, and he's got Pharisee support. And so because he's losing out, he brings Herod's father in. She's a ringer. She knows too much. Antipater is Herod's father. As a go-between between him and the Romans. get Roman support for his cause. In the meantime, this is around 66, 65, 64. Pompey is the commander of Roman troops in the east. He's making a name for himself by conquering in the east. And he's coming down from Asia Minor through Syria. And so this Hyrcanus, this older brother who's been ousted by his younger brother, goes to him through Antipater. Antipater also is part Arab, part Greek. This is how Herod's family gets into power. He's the go-between between the Arab king in Petra and the Romans and the Maccabees. And so that's another part of this equation. Petra, as you recall, is down here. And this is, these people were by this time called Arab. I'll finish up quick. Let me just finish up here. So, what happens is that as Pompey comes in, this Antipater starts to get more and more power. Anyway, he convinces Pompey to storm the temple in Jerusalem and vanquish Aristobulus' supporters who are holed up there. In the meantime, Aristobulus is sent in chains to Rome as a captive. All his supporters in the temple are butchered. And now the Romans take over in 63 BC when they storm the temple under Pompey. Mark Antony is one of Pompey's subalterns. He's in the country with him as a young soldier at this time. That's how he gets in touch with all these people. He later gets very close to Herod's father and Herod himself. But in any case, Pompey storms the temple in 63, vanquishes these people, sends Aristobulus to Rome in chains, sponsors Hyrcanus, but since he's very ineffectual, basically Antipater becomes the first Roman governor of Palestine. That's how Herod family starts out. So you see, now you have the historical basis on which to judge who are the Herodians. Is Herod the king of the Jews or a Jewish king? He's the king of the Jews by Roman consent, but he's not a Jewish king. And almost no one in the whole world knows this. Muhammad certainly doesn't know it, that's for sure. And lots of other folks don't know it. So in any case, slowly Herod's father insinuates a dynasty out of this. And in the next generation, Herod gets the support of, Pompey gets killed in the civil war with Caesar. He gets the support of Caesar and Mark Antony to make himself king. And he's a very long-lived king. And he reigns from somewhere in the 40s to 4 BC. And folks, that's where the Gospels pick up. And that's where we'll pick up next time. I will want to read, here's what I want to read. The birth of Jesus and so on, whatever material we have on this, but I also want to read the death and resurrection of Jesus. Because I think to understand the whole rest of reading the death and resurrection of Jesus materials first helps you go back and understand the other sort of materials. So that's what I'm going to focus in on, and I'll see you next time. I'm late, sorry, appreciate your patience. We finally got to where I wanted to get to. If there are any missing pieces here, ask me questions, we'll try to fill them in, okay? There are pieces missing, obviously, because I